Awesome. Great. Hey, wonderful to see everyone. I truly hope you're having a great week. My name is Bobby Lambert. I am honored to be the president of the Servant Leadership Association of Music. And it's a privilege to have this guest with us tonight who we're going to hear a bit more about in just a minute. Our fearless leader, Dr. Tim Lautzenheiser, sends his regrets. He's actually en route, I believe, home right now. Is that correct, Steve? Yeah, he's en route
Yes.
home, and so he knew that because of the timing and stuff, he wasn't going to be able to be here. And so, he sent a poor substitute to try and fill the shoes to give some words of wisdom. Well, even that person backed out, and I got stuck with the job. So it's me you're stuck with this evening. But of course, I just went through my archives and I've gotten the privilege to do several sessions with Tim. And there are 5 rules of leadership that he has talked about at different times. I've heard him do this session 3 times, and it took all 3 of them to get all 5 of them out of. So I'm going to give you the complete list of Tim's 5 rules of leadership. Number 1, people are more important than titles. And I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. That seems to be, that's exactly what you would expect from him. He talks about the idea that we don't have to be perfect, but we have to try, and how that idea is so important for us as the leaders. And then the other side of it is that the student's experience is more important than any music that they actually play. He talks about how uh, touching and having relationships with others is most important, and music happens to be the vehicle that we use to do it. Rule number 2, 90% of leadership is attitude, and you're the only one that controls attitude. He goes on to say at this point that motivation happens after something. There's very rarely motivation, and then we start to see things get better. It's a choice where we just say, I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm going to make this go. I'm going to do the very best I can. And then some things start to get some traction and gain some ground. So the idea of waiting for inspiration to strike, especially when it comes to building relationships and teaching, is not really very practical when it gets down to it. The third rule, he says, is you can't lead others until you lead yourself. He says, and when he gets to this point, everybody's sort of like, yeah, yeah. He goes, no, I want you to think about it a little bit differently. And he says, if everyone in the band were exactly like you in this moment, what would the band be like? I can't tell you how many times I've asked that questions of my class and of my students. If everybody did exactly as you, would we be better or worse? And that is a profound impact to a young person. It puts it in terms that they can really understand. Then I ask, if everyone were exactly like me in this moment, would the band be better or worse? And I'm not talking about could they play more in tune. Would they be a better place to exist or not? Number 4, you are measured by what you give, not what you have. Very rarely are people going to say, this is what you've achieved and all those things. And sometimes that's what it is. But I have a sneaking suspicion that Tim Lautzenheiser, if you said, we'd like to have a banquet for you, how should we introduce you? I don't think he would tell you about the books he's written or the businesses that he's done or the work with Con Selmer or any of those things. I think that he would want to be known as, I made a lot of people see their own self-worth. And that's a pretty powerful thing. The last one, the 5th rule, is you can only give what you have. We can't give respect unless we have respect. We can't give away knowledge unless we have that to give. We can't give away kindness unless we already have it in our hearts to give. And I think we are all in this place where the honeymoon phase is over with our schools. We're into maybe changing weather. We're into the grind of getting through this first semester. We're into the places where you've probably had an angry parent email by this point. I know I've had a few. And you're into that place where you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I still doing this? I always ask and hope that I'm shown at the exact right time when I need to remember what my importance is and what I have to give. And almost always there'll be a student that just comes by and says, "Hey, thank you for today." Or I'll get a note from somebody, "Hey, I'm an alum that did this or did that." Or our parents say, "We can't thank you enough for what you did for our child." It doesn't happen all the time. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like those things are put in our path to remind us of the importance and the influence that we certainly have in others. So I hope this week you are allowed to kind of think about your role in the students' lives and those 5 rules of leadership and how you may be able to present them as you go through your week. And this is where Tim was saying, "That's all I've got, Bobby." And he'd throw the ball back to me, and here we go. So, like I said, that was a poor substitute. But I hope that I'll be honest with you. Hmm, I keep these notes of how when Tim and I are together and getting to teach because I want to get to the place one day where I say, "Oh, I know that one. I already got that one. I knew that one." And every time it's like, "Oh crap, I've never thought of that. I've never heard that before." And so it's awesome just to get the chance to share that a little bit with you with that. Hi, there's Allie. She is on the trip home. She's had quite the harrowing experience today. So hopefully you are landed and there. So we're really glad to see you.
Thanks. It's been planes, trains, automobiles, buses, and a ballet. It was awesome.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. We're glad you're here. Well, tonight I get to introduce, I mean, just one of the most amazing people I have ever had the chance to spend time with. But before we do that, I get to throw it over to Scott Rush and let him do a little bit of the work for the while and give us maybe a tip for this week, especially right inside our classroom. Scott?
Well, good evening, everybody. And you really are making a difference in the life of young people. Bobby, you just hit it out of the ballpark. It was fantastic. So I have another list for us, actually. It's 6 habits of great music educators. And it's a little bit different slant. And so just some things to think about this week. And as you just think through, just how you go through the year and how you go through the semester and all those kinds of things. Number one is surround yourself with great people. And one of the things that was really beneficial to me was anytime that we would bring in someone to do like a symphonic camp or somebody to work with the students, they provided a great experience for the students, but boy, I was taking notes like crazy, right? And I learned so much from all those people that would come in. Every time somebody came in, I would learn something. Number two is have a clear vision of what you expect students to learn and master. There really is a sense of if it's built on excellence, then we have to have a clear vision. And my experience has been that sometimes as the teachers, we're the people who puts the glass ceiling on what is possible, which kind of takes us to number 3, which is great teachers have high expectations based on excellence that allows students to maximize their potential. I actually was at Baylor this week on Monday and Tuesday, and I had a student ask something about different models. And I mentioned that. I said, sometimes we are the people who put the glass ceiling and say, well, students are only capable of doing this, or we get comfortable in our own teaching and, we just kind of allow things to happen. When the reality is it all needs to be planned. We need to have really good systems and processes and then dream big for that. Number 4 is great teachers hold themselves and their students accountable. It's like pride in providing a sense of accomplishment. I think it was Freddie Martin who told us last year that his experience, and this was certainly true with my experience, that if students feel a sense of accomplishment, then they'll enjoy what they're doing. When they enjoy what they're doing, they'll practice. And then when they practice, they get better. When they get better, they'll have they'll have joy in what they're doing. So it's this almost water wheel idea of getting students to fall in love with music and music making. Number 5, great teachers never stop learning. And I'll tell you, when I was a young teacher, I wanted everybody to think I had it all figured out. And then when I was an older teacher and now, I enjoy learning more now than ever. And I'll just give you an idea. Frank Battisti has a brand new book. I don't even know that if it's out yet or not. He's 94 years old and he has a book out, and boy, never stop learning. That's what I'm reading right now. And then number 6, great teachers believe in their students, even when they don't believe in themselves. Ben Zander says our job is to awaken possibility. And Josh Shipp says every student is one significant music educator away from being a success story. So those are 6 habits of great music educators. I'll try to put them in the chat too. Bobby, that's it for me.
Hey, that's great. Scott, that last statement you made is a bit more profound than I think that maybe even we heard, that each student is one great music educator away from being a success. Maybe not necessarily in music, but
Right.
just that idea. Wow, there are times when I feel inspired and there are times when I feel convicted, and that's a little bit of both. So thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Hey, well, if you're joining us tonight, you are coming to hear one of my dearest friends of all time speak to you a little bit about his journey and his pathway into finding great success in music education. Maurice Burgess, I met Maurice my sophomore year of college, back in the Stone Ages, when he and I were drum majors together at Western Carolina University. I will never forget some of those first few days, and it was quite exciting. It was quite exciting to get to go through that, and quite harrowing at times. He can tell you I was not the most trained leader of all times, and so it was kind of like a bull in a china shop most of the time. Like, hey, we need to do this. Okay, don't care what happens. I just got to get it done. And he was always the heart of our drum major team. And so from that point on, we became dear friends. He finished as a music education instrumental as a trumpet player at Western Carolina University. He had come from Dorman High School in the upstate South Carolina. And then right when he finished, when he was ready to take the world by the horns in the band world, he kind of thought better of it and went to go be a singer, did his master's degree in voice. And so very much a shift. Now, the reason that this is interesting is because when Maurice and I still teach leadership camps today, Maurice, we taught our first leadership camp, I think in 1997. No, it's 6, because it was the Yamaha one at Duncan, wasn't it? 96. And we did Western at 97. Somewhere around there. Yeah, like we're coming up on 30 years of doing this together. And we were babies and dumb when we started this. But Maurice in front of students is just a joy to watch. They see his sincerity quickly and are glued. It's amazing. But anyway, he got done with his voice degree and then came back to his alma mater at Dorman High School to be an assistant choir director there, and was there for a number of years. Now he is the choir director at East Edisto Middle School in Dorchester, too, which is just above the Charleston County down here. And he opened that school, I think 3 years ago. Before that was at another middle school in there, and has just found all kinds of success. This year, his groups are performing at not one, but 2 separate conventions. One all-boys middle school choir, which is its own personal hell. If I'm just going to go ahead and say it, I can't even imagine what that is like. But then his treble ensemble, I think, just performed a week or 2 ago. So it's my honor and privilege to introduce Mr. Maurice Burgess to the group. Oh, and I should also mention he's a board member of this SLAM thing that we run here too. So thank you, Maurice, for joining us.
Of course. I just want to say, like, before I speak, that I can only speak from my perspective. And I think for me, when someone talks about me and they mention success, I feel like it doesn't quite always fit into my philosophy about it all, because I think what we're all aiming for is simply growth towards improved music education and creating a place where people want to belong. And in order to kind of talk about my philosophy, I think it's only right for me to talk about some of the people that truly influenced me and the things that stuck out with them that have influenced me. And I will tell you, my first music teacher was actually my mother, and she didn't have a music degree or anything like that. She was in, she went to Claflin University, and she was on the dance team. And if you were on the dance team, you had to play an instrument. I think she did that growing up. So she played the clarinet. She said she wasn't very good, but knowing my mother, she actually probably was very good. She said she just held it, but doubtful. But I got my start because I'm a double PK. All right, means a double preacher's kid. And so at some point, my parents figured out that I was the music kid because apparently I came out the womb and I was singing. And so I started off in our children's choir at the church. It was called the Sunbeam Choir. And we would do lots of revivals and choir anniversaries and church anniversaries. I actually started off singing gospel. I mean, my first experiences were gospel. And I remember my first solo that I can actively remember was a piece called Peanut Butter and Jelly. And it is a religious piece, and it just talks about a young person who just talking to their mother, and I was a mama's boy growing up, 100%, 150%. And it talks about how they're having a conversation with their mother, and they say, they say they're hungry, and they say, step into the kitchen, I'll make you a sandwich, is one of the texts. But then they admit that they're not hungry for food. They're hungry for feeling fulfilled, in that case, religiously. And those things kind of stuck with me, especially just looking at music and immediately feeling like it has to have purpose, it has to have intent, it has to have meaning, something that is personal to us, something that is connected to us. So that was my first start. And then I was lucky enough to have an elementary music teacher who was just great. Miss Waddell was her name. And in third grade, you could try out for, I love my music classes with her, but in third grade, you could try out for a thing called Music Visions and Art Visions. And I made it into both, but I just really felt strongly led to do the music side of it. And so I got to spend more time with her, and it's things like playing the recorder. And we would do recorder ensemble stuff. We would do different types of bells. We would do these mini musicals, actually, and I can't remember what it was. I think it was Tall Tales and Heroes was actually the name of it. Still don't remember. And all I remember is that my friend Lakita Porter was Slewfoot Sue, but I got that start just being able to be expressive and on stage and singing. And I just can't even thank her enough for allowing me to realize that music could be a creative outlet. Because as a kid, I will say, I was one of those kids that didn't necessarily know how to manage my emotions, if managing is the correct word. I remember I got stung by a bee one time. You can think this is random, and I just started crying. And my parents were like, "Does it hurt?" And I said, "No, but I don't understand why it would be so mean." And yeah, and so I just didn't really have a way to really express those. And honestly, being on stage and through music, I learned how to manage that. And then I think um, after that, I was lucky enough to have a fantastic middle school band director who shaped me in a different way. In that he was a bassoon player, but more of a woodwind specialist. He could play all the instruments. Frank Watson, and he just always looked up to him because he still played professionally in the Greenville Symphony, and he had played in some really top-notch bands with some pretty famous folks growing up. And it made me really think, even in middle school, that if I am going to um, do this music thing, then I need to understand that I need to keep making music myself and growing from being around professionals that inspire me. And so I've sort of taken that, and that's a part of my philosophy with my own students as well. Um, and so Frank Watson was great. His son was a trumpet player with us, and Todd, and we were the same age, and so we got to know each other through All-State, Region Band, marching band, and so it always had a really, really, really big impact, even to the point that my 8th grade year, when he went to a different school in the district, that he was still like that. That was my band director. Like he had just really influenced me. And then I was lucky enough to continue that in high school. George Winger was my band director there. Somebody that made me really look at a sense of community within a music program. The fact that how he would always talk to us about win with humility and lose with dignity. Just because with marching band you're competing and it's easy to compare yourself, but to understand that even when you think that it's a loss, you might, or you don't come in first place or whatever it may be, that what can you learn from it? There needs to be some humility there, and there needs to be some growth. And I feel like that was infused within me as well. Allison Drewley, who is the reason that I went to Western Carolina University, I just remember one day she was conducting 3/4 and 4/4 at the same time, and I said, "What are you doing? Are you conducting 3/4 and 4/4 at the same time?" And she said, "Yes." And at that moment, I thought, I really want to really just explore all of these different things with my own conducting, just to figure out coordination and everything like that. And so I just thought she was the coolest person. Scott Keever, our percussion guy, who just had the biggest heart. Andy Hodges also, who had the best humor of that staff. And so again, I'm saying this to say that as I've traveled through my own personal music education journey, there have been people that have influenced my whole philosophy about it, and there's takeaways. Donna Densmore, my high school course teacher, who was the reason I teach choir, actually, because at some point there was the whole thought that I would become a band director. Actually, the conversation went like this. My father and I were talking about what I wanted to do, and I said, "Well, I really want to either play trumpet in a symphony orchestra or sing on Broadway. That's the two things I wanted to do." And he goes, "Well, what is your real job?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to be a band director." And I just wanted to be like, "Chill, man." But that I'd sort of been brainwashed into thinking that band was my path and my only path. And then my junior year, I started doing choir again in high school. I couldn't do it in middle school. I just couldn't fit into my schedule. Um, and Donna Densmore, who I think just had the most impeccable standard, who I came to find out years later from teaching a child that was the son of a man that graduated with her in a class of 25 up in Maine, that she was actually a bass clarinet player as well. And also a pianist and quite a singer. And she was where I really was pushed to think about technical knowledge. And then obviously once I went on to college, I had Bob Buckner. Bob Buckner had been somebody that I had known since I was in middle school because he wrote for our band. And I just always thought he was such a celebrity, even like when I was a 9th grader, looking up and seeing this guy who I thought was this god among music people, which he is. And yet he was so approachable, and yet he was always so caring and understood. I think I learned a lot from him about leadership, and I'll get back to that in a little bit. But so those are kind of the people that really influenced me, and I want to talk about sort of how within my own program. A lot of times people talk about how do you in middle school develop culture, because middle school can tend to be so toxic, and I actually want to kind of flip that and say that maybe we need to have a mindset shift, because middle schoolers are absolutely incredible individuals.
Hey,
Um,
Maurice,
the
can
le-
I interrupt and say, when you talk about culture, can you also give ideas about how you connect with kids?
Yeah, yep.
Beautiful.
So, but in looking at it, middle schoolers are absolutely deep thinkers, probably as deep as any of us, maybe even deeper, because they're really trying to figure out who they are and what they are about. And I think that is sort of the beginning of all of just thinking about the cultural part with them, is that it is all about developing a relationship first. And one of the things that is always not necessarily in the background, but also parallel to any of the other things that I'm doing to train them to have the habits that they need. There's also that I want to ask how your day is going. I want to find out what you feel good about today. I want to find out what's frustrating to you today, and whether or not I can help you figure out a way to get past that. But I think that when a kid comes into my program, we have that aspect of things, but also go about really getting them to understand how we operate. Just because you don't know what you don't know. And so for me with the sixth grader, I feel like we function more like a band. Like we have specific ways we communicate things. So we're singing. I don't want to hear, hey, can I go to the bathroom? Or hey, can I get some water? So we use sign language. And so that's our thing that allows us to keep singing, because I can be conducting and look over on, I'm just going to make up a name, Guinevere, and say, fine, because she's giving me restroom or toilet or water or something like that. And so one of the first things is just instilling what are the cultural norms of what we do. And one of the big parts of that is how we communicate. I also really try to drive home the point that for me in communicating with them, that it has to be delivered with compassion. And I like to talk to them about the fact that I'm giving them positive performance feedback. All right. And by that, I mean feedback that is meant for us to continuously grow, and not, oh, you did this wrong, but something, and sometimes I get pretty nerdy about it. And I'll get back to that in a second and show you a little bit if I can get a mic and a mic to work at the same time. But for me, I introduced the rehearsal skills aspect with a rubric, just like you would with anything else, just like they would get assessed in an audition, which is the first thing is thinking about alignment, thinking about score study. Each of those are assigned points, and it's related to consistently, frequently, rarely, or all of those categories, and each of those are sort of assigned a point value. So that's alignment, score study, sound and silence, and the last one's engagement, which I always tell them that kind of takes care of itself if you do the other one. But I like the sound and silence part of it with them, because one thing that we get to do is, and I don't usually give them the answer to this. Like I might look at my sixth grade class and say, how do we demonstrate a consistent understanding of sound and silence within this rehearsal? And of course, it's a music class. A lot of them are going to say rests, notes, articulation, things like that. They might not use the word articulation. They might say words, but all those things. But also too, you get that kid whose wheel is turning and they say, oh, by speaking when we're supposed to be speaking, by raising my hand if I need to talk, by being encouraging to the person beside me. And sometimes you have to kind of guide them towards, this is actually also a part of sound and silence. How do you use that sound? Are you using that sound to build up the people that are there? Or are you using that sound to tear them down? I also like to think about, I had a lot of wrestlers last year, and one of the things that I sort of had to talk to with my wrestlers, this was I have an 8th grade Cambiata baritone class, which is basically tenors and basses, and so it's all boys. Every now and then there's a scheduling thing, and there's a girl that really wants to be in choir, but they're also in a class that conflicts with it, and so sometimes they'll be in there, and they find their way to make it work. It's really kind of cool to see. But one of the things I had to talk to them about is that teamwork can look a little bit different depending on the activity. And so one of the things with the wrestlers is you have those people that maybe don't get a lot of points or don't earn any points, right? But then you have those people that get a lot of points, and you can still win with that amount of points. But this kid was actually a captain that I had this conversation with. But we talked about how it's very different in an ensemble because it's simultaneous teamwork. And I want us to think about that because there's a difference between teamwork. I work in my corner, you work in your corner, and then we get together. And there's like teamwork that is absolutely ensemble teamwork. And so we have discussions about that. And honestly, I know some people go, you have discussions about that with middle schoolers, and I think the answer has to be yes, because the whole reason that I even moved to teaching middle school is because I felt like I would meet high schoolers that had so many life things where they needed somebody that was willing to be there for them earlier and sooner. And I think the misconception that people have is that middle schoolers have easy lives. Oh, you're a kid, you're playing, all this stuff. But some kids have lost family members. I will never forget when I lost my father. It was devastating, absolutely devastating. But a couple of weeks later, one of my seventh grade boys lost his mother, and she had him at a young age. His mother was only in her 20s, late 20s. And so you can sort of figure out that math there. But it put some things into perspective for me. Or even conversations with kids. There was a kid who had done some things in elementary school that were not kosher, and word had kind of spread. Basically, they'd broken into one of the elementary schools, which is pretty impressive for a bunch of elementary kids. But I remember talking to this kid, and I always make a point of seeing a kid not as the bad kid. All right, we know that kids come to us and they say, "Oh, these fifth graders coming next year are rough," but I try to make sure that I give every kid a chance. And I try to remember that every kid has things that they're going through and layers that I will never see, but I need to be aware that they might exist. All right. And so it requires me to deliver my understanding of who they are as a person with compassion. And so, but this kid, I'll never forget, he said to me, he said, "Oh, why do you always believe in me? I can never escape my past." And I looked at him and I said, "You mean when you broke into your elementary school?" I was like, "I already know about that." I was like, "But you come into my classroom every day and you do all the things that you're supposed to do. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that." And that kid, like, it just turned it around that somebody was able to look at him and say, "Hey, man, like, you've got some great things going on." And I think that that is the thing that we've got to understand about kids. My seventh grade right now really, really brings me a lot of joy, and I'll tell you why. Um, I've got people would think, "Oh, your groups are performing at this and that," and think that, I think it's easy for programs to be elitist and be exclusive. But my seventh grade, I've got a lot of students that are in special education classes, autistic students, students with Down syndrome, and what I absolutely love about it is that nobody looks at any kid in their classes and sees them as the other. They look at the people in their class and they see them as, "This is my choir family member, and I need to make sure that I am lifting them up." And this is something we talk about. And sometimes kids don't know how to. They don't know how to have conversations. And sometimes positive conversations they don't know how to have. So, so if a kid, comes to me and they say, "Well, I noticed that so and so," well, have you thought about maybe take the time and let them know, and say something positive to them. They might notice that a kid is kind of withdrawn, or they seem to be going through things, or they sit alone at lunch. And so we talk a lot about that, about being the person that's there. And what I love about it is I've got some really great singers in that class that have it together and they can read and they have the vocal technique, but those kids don't see themselves as better as my students that are dealing with other issues. And they don't see issues. They see somebody that's contributing to their experience and to their sense of family. But one of the things, when I when I go to my classroom is that I really try to make sure that even the pieces that I'm picking have intent, um, and have meaning. And so we just performed at ACDA, and on the surface, our theme seems like an elements theme. And it was, right? There was fire, there was also, well, actually started with wind. Wind, there was fire, there was water, there was also the earth. And um so one of the things that we talked about with it was growth through the character. And so, for instance, when we were doing Viento, it's a Matthew Goronsky piece. It's about the wind, and it's very simple. And first of all, that piece we wanted to do it because it's something that a really good elementary honor choir could also do. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing things that anybody can see themselves in. And so that piece we talked about, okay, let's talk about the wind and talk about different characteristics. And of course, you talk about things like the breeze, you talk about hurricanes, tornadoes, dust devils. But then I would always try to spin that for them and say, now, how do we see those characteristics reflected in ourselves? How can we also manifest different aspects of who we are? And so they would talk about, well, sometimes I need to be comforting like the breeze. Or sometimes I need to deliver things with intent and force, like the wind, because it's important and it needs to be done and it's the right thing to do. And so I always try to make sure that we talk about the basic part of it, but we also talk about how it reflects in ourselves. And um, in the song Fire, we talked about, because naturally somebody can say it out loud. If you had to think of what element is opposed to fire, you would say that it is
Water.
exactly. And it's easy to think that well, it's like this battle and fire comes in. I love the first words of Fire by Mary Getz. The poem was written by a 13-year-old. And so I love that because a lot of the students in front of me are 13, and so we would talk about that. But part of the text is, I am fire, you know me by my warmth and my light. And so we would talk about how fire can bring just like the wind can bring comfort, in addition to all of the other things. And so that's part of it. And there's a middle section that I love so much. We would talk about how this is how we need to be about things that are important to us, where the altos and soprano too sing, I am endlessly moving, I am endlessly moving. And they say that over and over, chanting it underneath in this ostinato kind of legato section. And then the soprano ones say, I am fire, you know me. Um, uh, and it's like just saying, you know who I am fire, you know me for my endless moving. And we would talk about how we have to think about the concept of spreading goodness as something that we don't stop, that it has to continue that forward momentum. And so that's was sort of our thoughts in that. So in the end of Fire, it says, I have one foe who swallows my light. And obviously, we know that that's water. And so, but what we chose to do with it, rather than doing something like a storm, is that we did in Time of a Silver Rain, Sarah Quartel. And you probably are familiar with this text a little bit. Where it talks about green grasses grow and flowers lift their heads. Um, and it talks about basically the renewal of life. And so I wanted them to see that, and we would talk about how instead of being this torrential downpour, that it was this gentle rain that was focused on renewal and growth. And how can we as a group think about renewal and growth? And so I like the last part of it, in Time of Silver Rain, passing boys and girls go singing to In Time of Silver Rain. And so it sort of brings it back to the fact that all of us as a people, that we are also growing. And so that of course, led into a piece called Metsa Telegram. It's an Estonian piece, and it's basically the subtitle to that is the woodpecker song, because it has this talk, talk, talk comes a signal from the forest. And we talked with them about how this kind of is like our like this is like a dangerous thing to say these days, but this is kind of like our protest line, right? About how we are like we were talking about saving the forest, but we just ended a song that talked about that compared the girls and the boys to these plants that are growing. And so basically we're talking about being kind to each other and saving each other. And it has this one place where it says, "Save the forest, join the chorus. There is much that you can do." And I wanted them to see that each and every one of us has to heed the call of, we can also do something. There's something that each of us can do to contribute positively to the situation. And the middle is really neat. It's got the birds still serenade the morning sky, while beasts still run and streams still ripple on. It talks about, we all are one, we cannot let them die. Move quickly now before they're gone. And in that text, I talked to them about how we have different voices, because the sopranos have this ya da 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 da, and the altos come in. Sorry, let me get to the right part. It is sorry. While birds still serenade the morning skies, is that part, right? And the altos have, while birds still serenade, and how each of us has a different type of voice. And so that section was really neat, because I was able to help them map out that this has a different type of voice than what the sopranos are. But guess what? You can both still be delivering the same message at the same time, just with a differing voice. And so that piece was sort of how we ended. And I say this to say that for me, culture is largely taught through the repertoire too. That we have all those habits and things and ways that we operate, and ways that I try to treat them, and ways that I remind them that I always like to tell them, and I know I've said this before, that I am not a superior voice to theirs, that I am simply a voice at a different stage of the journey, and that their voice is just as important as mine. It's just at a different stage, and they might not know all of the things that they want to know yet, but that doesn't make my voice any more valid. And so that's sort of how we also operate within that program. And the same thing with the tenor bass choir that I have that is going to be performing. Our whole thing is built around the armed soldier. That is, I can give you the scripture. That's Matthew chapter 8, verse 5 through 13. Also in Luke 7. But basically, it's the Roman centurion who believed in Jesus to come and fix his servant. And so you saw this centurion that could have taken their elevated position and been lacking in compassion, but he wanted to serve someone that society would have told him is beneath him. And so we're sort of building it around that theme. And there's anything from an African song that simply means to sing, to a DSE ray within there. Within the armed soldier, I really am big into, this is where my instrumental side comes into play. I'm really big into maximizing all of our talents. And what I love about that piece is that it was standard practice with medieval music, Renaissance music, to sort of transcribe or create some instrumental parts to be with the voices. And so I've got a tuba player, so we've written a tuba part. I have a violin player, so after the percussion leads him in, he starts the melody on the violin. And so I really try to, we call them hybrids. That's what it's called in our program. But I always try to make sure that our hybrids get to share all of their talents. But within that, we're trying to really look at how we can serve others. There's a piece called Make Space for Life to Live. Michael John Trotta, because I think every middle school boy needs to be reminded that we need to make space for life to live, because you would like to be in your classroom disrupting it, going 6-7 and skibbity and whatever else there may be. But you know how I got rid of that? I didn't make the song, but there was a song, and it had all of the brain rot in it, and so I did the warm up and sort of adapted a little bit. And I haven't heard 6-7 in so long. It's been beautiful, chef's kiss.
Please, can we make Maurice's quote that we put out on all the social media just be skibbity, like just that? Done. That's it.
Oh my goodness. So again, I try to focus through the repertoire. Now, that being said, I actually, Bobby, at Western started off instrumental and didn't want to lose my instrumental side, so I picked up voice. So I picked up instrumental music education and actually student taught choral. And what sort of ignited my love of the singing side is I did a lot with Asheville Lyric Opera. I went and auditioned. I saw an opera in Knoxville and loved it. It was Barbara Seville, after being an opera hater. And it made me fall in love, because I thought, well, I like this bel canto thing. It's pretty cool. So I say all of this to say that I definitely have my very methodical ways that I go about developing things in my classroom, but I think at the core of it, the motivation has to be pure. If a kid wants to talk to me, I make time, because if they see it as important, and man, let me tell you, I understand middle school students can talk your head off, because yeah, I got 200 plus of them to be thinking about at any given moment. But I think it's important for them to know that they're heard. I'm gonna tell you this too. I'm gonna say this too about sometimes people look at conferences and things, and they think about them as being an accomplishment or a prestigious thing. I don't see it that way, and I try to make sure that my students don't as well. I try to frame it in a sense of, we get the opportunity to share a complete artistic message in a set of pieces with a group of people, and we get the opportunity to really work hard to give our best so that we can maybe inspire someone else. We talk a lot about how there's so many different levels of programs, and I always tell them that you never know who is out there, even when you're thinking about choral directors, that hears you sing, that might go back and have something new to give to their own students. And so I think that whether it's a conference or a community performance, I think both are the same, both are important, and both serve in a different way. And I try to get them to understand that it is about how things serve. I know we talked about how I do band and chorus, and I'll tell you, my band side comes to play in my choir room all the time. I'll look at my kids and I'll say, okay, twos. And guess what? They'll go into twos, because that's how my brain's kind of wired, and that's sort of how their brain's being wired in a sense. Sometimes I keep my trumpet in my room and I play it almost every day, mostly just exercises and things like that. But there might be a piece of the music where I say, this is more like a brass fanfare, and I'll just play it on my horn, and then I'll sing it, and then we'll try to figure out how we can duplicate that. And so I say this to say, I think music education is music education. And I think that at some point growing up, people helped make me a real person through music education. They made me see other people. They made me see that I needed to be able to communicate to other people, with other people, to listen to other people, because we always bring it back, like listening in music is like listening just in general. If you talk about balance between sections, well, what about the balance, emotional balance? What about the mental balance? What about the cultural balance within that? And so we really try to link every aspect of what we do to life. And I'm gonna tell you, I hope that my kids, if there's nothing else that they gain from me, I hope that they're able to see that I care about them, that I'm loyal, that I don't think I'm perfect, that I know that I can grow, that some of them are actually going to help me grow, and that it isn't just me, the music educator, trying to inspire growth in them, but that we are all kind of traveling this life journey together. And simply at this stage that they're in, that I'm in it with them too. And that the best thing that we can ever do musically, culturally, personally is to strive for simply being better and more than we were. But then also not forgetting that we have to be better and more together.
Wow. Maurice, that is fantastic. Holy crap. Um, I am honored to be your friend. And it was great hearing you kind of dive into that. David Vanderwalker's comment is exactly right. He says that'll preach. Uh, and your mom and dad, they were especially proud tonight. So thank you for that. We'll see if we have a little bit more time for some questions for Maurice at the end. Brian, Christians, would you please, we kind of do a leadership moment right now, kind of taking what we just heard and maybe trying to focus it into this. I don't know that we're going to have time to break into small groups, but could you kind of help us put that whole idea, and there's a lot of great stuff there. What kind of stuck out to you about what we can take into our classes this week?
Well, I've heard so many things tonight, and I jotted a few things down, but uh, just right there at the end when Maurice was talking about us growing, I think it's really important to acknowledge to the kids that they've helped us grow. It just sort of turns the tables and it gives them a little pride, and it's like, wow, really, I helped you grow, and it just is a launch pad for better things to come. And then another thing, when he said that he keeps his trumpet handy, I think it's so important that we model from the podium um, any kind of musicality. I may or may not have my clarinet around, but I'll sing, and I'm not the greatest singer. But when they hear me make myself vulnerable, I think there's some heartwarming, heart attachment kinds of moments there, and they're more willing to make themselves vulnerable. And then just Maurice said so many good things, and I can't enhance or add to that. But going back to something that Scott said, surround yourself with great people. Well, whenever we can't surround ourselves with great people, make the people who surround you feel like they're great. And you lift others up. I heard several people say that tonight. But maybe, in your spare time, while you're thinking, while you're drinking your coffee before rehearsal or whatever, just jot down a few things about some individuals that you like about them, and that you think that you can lift them up with. And I'm not talking about praise so much. I mean, and we know what false praise is, but just making them feel valued. I know that I talked about how great my staff was and how they made me look really good a lot of the time. Sometimes I had to make others feel like they were great, like use their talents, use their gifts, and delegate something so that you can lift them up in that moment. And then it just grows from there. So I just heard a lot of things tonight about putting the limelight on other people, and it just kind of hit home tonight. So thank you, Maurice. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Bobby. And welcome, Dr. Tim. We missed you. Good to see you this evening.
Thank you so much, Brian. We really appreciate that a lot. And as we're kind of coming to the close of our evening, if Tim feels up to it to do our closing thoughts, and I know, Tim, I don't know exactly when you got in, but I saw you about midway through Maurice's time with us. I had to share some of your quotes for the opening. So, I mean, nobody can beat that. So, Tim, would you mind giving us some thoughts as we go into our work week?
Sure, thanks. And I'm glad I got to. They had to circle a couple times before they landed. And I actually parachuted. That is frightening, I want to tell you. But I got, no, this. You know that I love country music, and what you were all saying. When you're not with the one you love the one you're with. God, that is so deep. And it's so easy to we want to surround ourselves with greatness. Well, that's not always possible, but we make the people around us great. Real quickly, I have to tell you because we were talking about modeling, and in the last couple of weeks, I had a student group. Great kids were just great, all from different schools. There was one little group that's kind of snarky is the wrong word, but it was tight and probably took maybe 10 minutes and finally it unloosened it. And they were the ones that were in the end were up and hugging and this is what we need to do and so forth. So then I went in to be with the teachers and there was a group of about 3 teachers that were kind of snarky. And you know where I'm going with it, don't you? Those were the teachers of those kids. So afterwards, I said something to the host. I said, can you tell me about those 3 teachers there who participated out of, uh, I don't know, mandate problem or anything else, but certainly, were to themselves, oh, from that school. And I said, is that the same school that those, and they're like, yeah. So we just keep getting the message over and over again. Our life mirrors us. We don't mirror it. And boy, that's a big one to put our arms around. So it's just good to see everybody. I'm glad I got to sneak in at the last minute. Bobby, I'll give them back to you. Love you guys. Missed you that first part.
We're so glad to have you back with us and glad that your travels have brought you safely home. So
Yeah, and that parachuting thing, you want to try it just, on kind of a slower pace than I did coming out at 35,000.
a slower pace. Everyone, well, my cup is full, and partially by Maurice's great, I'm going to say it, testimony, and partially by just seeing all of your kind faces. Julie, I have to do a special shout out to you because getting your email Monday morning saying good morning was a highlight of my week. So thank you so much for thinking of me and thinking of us when you did that. Really means a lot. It's so good to see all of you. We hope you have a wonderful week. Next week, we're going to be joined by Koji Mori. Koji is the orchestra director at Harrison High School in Cobb County, Georgia, was a longtime band director. You might know him from a drum corps show back in the 90s by Phantom Regiment. It was about Spartacus. And there was a gentleman on the field that yells, I am Spartacus. And he takes a long pike, a long staff, stabs the drum major exactly, and then conducts the rest of the show. That's Koji Mori. And we do a lot of drum major camps with Maurice and with him. And kids still, Koji's like, nobody's going to remember that. It's not going to. And as soon as they see him come out and they recognize him, it's pandemonium from that point on. And then he's signing autographs from that point on. But you talk about somebody who is just like Maurice, so down to earth and so much about the people business, as Scott says, rather than just the music business. He is certainly one. So hearing how he has one foot in the band world, one foot in the orchestra world, I think will be really unique and interesting for us next week. So with that being said, thank you, everyone. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. And we'll see you in 2 weeks, November 2nd, with Koji Mori.